Hello, welcome to our panel about personalized learning and study tools. This is a really interesting panel with some incredible speakers. So we're welcome in. I see people flooding on in. That last panel was really interesting. You saw me all hiding in the chat, but wow, fascinating discussion. And I'm really looking forward to keeping that energy going. So come on in. We are going to drop the links. I don't know if you can see them yet. Let me do this now. The links to everybody's, oh, there it is. Yep, the links to everybody's sites are in the chat right now. Please check them out. These are really interesting tools that are all personalizing learning in very different ways. And to get us started, looks like we're basically at our quorum. So to get us started, I'm going to ask, as a matter of introduction, let's go around the room and I want to ask each of you about your take on what personalized learning means to you. This is a term that has been overloaded for decades in education and used in every different capacity, but I think we're getting to an interesting moment. So let's go around. Tell me what personalized learning means to you and how the work you're doing with your companies supports your vision of personalization. Let me start with you, Varun.
Yeah, happy to be here, Alex. And to answer your question, I'd say personalized learning is the intersection of three things. It's students, it's their current abilities, and it is whatever learning objective that they or their teacher is wanting them to accomplish. And how that relates to what we do, I'm the co-founder of a company called litlab.ai, and we make K through 2 reading more differentiated and more joyful. And what that means is that teachers and students have the power to make their own personalized phonics readers, which are known as decodable content, using AI.
Fantastic. And let me pass it to you, Christian.
Yeah, good morning and thanks for having me. Yeah, what is personalized learning? Our company is called learn.xyz, so we do definitely something with personalization. I think just the word learning or like studying often sounds hard. And so that's why we like to actually talk about curiosities and that if someone that is curious or people that are curious, they essentially like find something in our product because we allow users to type in whatever they want, and then it creates a course or a curiosity on that particular topic for them on the fly. And so personalized learning is in the end to nurture your curiosities in a way that wasn't possible before, because this personal tutoring is in a way which was really hard at scale. But now with the power of AI, and that's what we do, we are able to do that. And it's an app on Android and iOS, and you should try it out.
Absolutely. Bodo, how about you? What does personalization mean to you and what are you doing at
Yeah.
Knowledge?
So I'm co-founder and CIO at Knowledge. Personalized learning to me is all about tapping into the learner's intrinsic motivation. What is it that they want to learn? This comes out from context of my own educational experience. I did not have a very good educational experience, and I didn't spend much time in traditional education. Grew up in Southern Africa and had really terrible educational resources available, and I wasn't able to go to college. But what was always interesting to me was that didn't stop me from learning. However, what would have helped me learn better was resources and tools that could help me tap into my intrinsic motivation. What is it that I want to learn? So for myself, I had to sneak into various universities and courses and things that I couldn't afford to learn what I needed to learn. However, how can we do that at scale? And we do that at scale by the tools that we're developing. Tool one is Knowledge AI, which can rapidly generate bite-sized educational content from any suitable information on the internet. Audio, video, text, anything, it can convert that into bite-sized educational content. And then two is, what do we do with these packages now, this content? What we do is we map it out to Google Maps for learning. This is a multi-dimensional latent space. So now you can search for anything that you want to learn. You can tap into your intrinsic motivation. Like, I want to become a manager at a marketing store. Or I want to solve this problem. Or I want to be available for this position or just complete this project. These tools allow you to tap into that intrinsic motivation. So that's what I think personalized learning is all about.
Yeah. So we're hearing interest-based motivation, interest-based personalization, motivation-based personalization, the idea of following your curiosity. Kavita, who you are also going to serve as a co-host for this session because you are a veteran podcaster, tell us about Nectar and your take on personalization.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Kavita. I'm the co-founder and CEO here at Nectar, and we build Slack for schools. My co-founder Jordan and I started Nectar when we were undergrad students at UC Santa Barbara, and it was in order to fulfill a part of our learning experience that we felt was missing. And at the time, I didn't know the term personalized learning. I had no idea that's what we were actually building. But what we felt we needed and what the gap in our classes was the ability to have agency over our own learning experience. I am autistic and I have ADHD, so I've classically learned at a very different pace than everyone else. And for K through 20, for the most part in this country, it's one size fits all classes. So when you have students that are either falling behind because it's too fast or it's too slow and it gets boring for them, you can see there's about only 20% of the class that really fits into the pace that the teacher has set. And that's not the teacher's fault. It's more of a product of us not having the right tools and technology for students to be able to decide their pace of learning. So for me, with building Nectar, the real goal was to put a community in every class so that you didn't just have one teacher, you had as many teachers as there were students in the class. So that at any time of the day, if you needed a question answered or you needed to go get resources or dive into a curiosity, like you're saying, Bodo, you had your peers around you to be teaching you as well, to then also help take some of that burden off of the instructor so they could focus on the actual material that they were providing to us, which is the most important thing that they can do, in my opinion. So, in line with creating that personalized learning experience and giving agency back to students, this year we released our AI teaching assistant, Soma. And we did over 1,000 user interviews with students, faculty, and admin and staff across the globe to figure out how do we bring AI into the classroom safely and in a way that actually adheres to a jobs to be done framework, right? What do you actually need right now, and how can AI solve that? And the number one thing we heard time and time again was, I can't give that one-on-one personalized learning experience to every single one of my students. And I know that's what they want. And so I think that's really where AI shines right now. So what we've done with Soma is use the GPT-4 API and allow, in a FERPA compliant way, for instructors to train GPT-4 on their own personal data set. So their syllabus, their course lectures, whatever they choose, to create basically a private chat GPT for their classroom so that students have 24/7 resource accessibility. Whether they need to go in and say, when is the midterm or what's due this week, all the way to, can you explain the instructions to me like I'm 5? I really don't get it. And for me, that would have helped me so much in the classroom, feel less embarrassed, feel like I said, have agency over my learning experience, and so put the onus back on me to go get what I'm looking for from my education.
Amazing. One thing I admire about all of your products is you're bringing that spirit of sort of autodidacticism. You're like, I wish, Bodo, you said I had to sneak my way into classes to figure out what I needed to know. And Anant Agarwal from Edtech said famously, he was at MIT, but he didn't go to classes. He would go to the library and learn on his own. There's a lot of people out there who are not following traditional pathways. And that concept of personalizing your own learning and then injecting that back into education systems and allowing people to personalize within formal systems is really exciting. And Kavita, you talked about differentiation of pace or for special needs, which is yet another type of personalization beyond interest and curiosity and motivation. So I want to circle back around now. I think, Christian, let's start with you just because you do something that I think is the furthest outside of the formal system. Yet LearnXYZ is really basically a B2C product. It's about people being able to use AI to learn anything they want at any time in this very gamified Duolingo-like system. Let's start there. Tell us a little bit about how you think about curiosity as this springboard for learning, and then we'll move more and more into formal systems like higher ed and K-12 and corporate too.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. And also, first, I have to say, Kavita, like your answer just like was amazing. So you should actually answer all the questions here because it was so good. So I look forward to more of this conversation. Yeah. So what do we do, and why we think it's so important? And most people actually don't know what they want to learn, right? Like there's this famous quote, like if Henry Ford had asked people they wanted faster horses, and this is kind of drove us as well, like how can we actually inspire people to spend their time in a better way? And so you said that we are actually not really a learning product because it's more like this casual education. And we like to compare us as an alternative actually to like wasting your time on TikTok or Instagram where people doom scroll. And so the idea is really to build something that people feel good about the time that they spend. And when you open our app, the idea is really to like just inspire you. There's a feed, looks almost similar to what you on Instagram or other places where you have pieces of content, but rather than just not really transmitting something that is useful. We try to have really cool content that is generated entirely by AI, right? Like the text, the images, the quizzes, and then AI also recommends other things to dive deeper into. And this is where you get into the learning. Like first, it gives you an overview about a specific topic, and then AI recommends additional topics to dive deeper into. So for me, it's like similar to when you're on Wikipedia, right? Like you read one article about some queen, and then you see this castle, and then you see French cuisine, and then you dive deeper and you get into these rabbit holes. And this is exactly what happens in our product. And so we are not really an education company in that traditional sense. Probably maybe we're like an inspiring company, and that's why we use these terms like curiosity and like for the curious. And because again, what I said earlier, right, like learning itself, or the word learn, courses, lessons, it all sounds like work for many people. Of course, a lot of people also that really like education, and similar to Bodo, I did my bachelor but like barely made it. And because also this content wasn't personalized for me, and we really tried to do something there. But it's kind of like an overview of what how we think about it.
Oh, this is my turn. I get to jump in. Awesome. Oh, I've been waiting. Okay. There's a question that sort of has been brewing in my mind for a while when I look at all of these new AI tools that are coming into the classroom. And I think it's something that you've seen a lot of articles on and we've grappled with. And in my opinion, being someone that is building on this side and has interviewed a lot of these instructors and students, something that came up a lot was how can we, as the builders, choose to ethically build AI into the learning experience, ensuring that teachers still have a role to play in the classroom, but that students are getting a much deeper education than they ever could have before. So, Bodo, I want to present this to you, and I'd love Varun and Christian for you to jump in if you have an answer to add on to this. But what are your thoughts around how to ethically build AI into the classroom without having it infringe or step on the teacher's toes? And is there a world in which AI replaces teachers?
Yeah, so a bit of context. I started doing research. I developed a learning management system that I sold to Google about 10 years ago. And then from that moment, I started to do research. And I researched mainly within contexts where there are no traditional educational resources, like conflict zones, the slums of East Africa, helping to teach Afghan girls who aren't allowed to go to school. Within those contexts, there are no traditional resources we could tap into. And my initial thought was, what do we help these learners take their learning to their own hands by simply providing content? If we could provide if we could somehow provide them the right content, could they learn everything they needed to? And we discovered quite quickly is that content, even the best content in the world, can only get you about 20% through the learning experience. The other 80% comes through your interactions with other learners, with other experts, with mentors, with your educators, with humans that present information in different nuanced ways. Present, and then you figuring out this yourself. You now have this knowledge and you want to present it to your friends. We created this little mechanism by which, in order for a student to provide proof that they have mastered a particular concept, they need to teach 2 of their friends. And so now the students are teaching each other. And that's where most of the learning came from, not from the content. The content is super important, right? It gives you the key, the vocabulary and the key ideas, but most of the teaching is external to that. Most of the learning is external to that. So I think AI can help with that. AI can definitely help teachers generate content really quickly, but a lot of the education is going to come through those interactions with other humans.
I'd love to hear. I know you work to personalize learning in classrooms, in especially early learning classrooms. How do you think about that relationship between teaching from human teachers, and AI content?
Yeah, it's such a good question. And in a way, this is like a philosophical and political position that every single organization that's building tools for kids, teachers needs to take. Is the AI augmenting the teacher, or is it the teacher itself? I think we've seen a lot of like rise of like AI tutors that have come out recently. I think there is a place for that as well. We personally took the stance of, in K through 2 reading, the role of the teacher is precious, and we want to support and augment and supercharge that educator that's already overwhelmed by making it so that they can reach even more students more deeply. And I really like what Bodo was saying about content can only take you so far. It's the other learning experiences that happen around it. Like when a kid is talking about something that they learned, when a teacher is able to pull in a student into exactly what they are interested in, that's where I think it gets really fascinating. One other thing I'll mention to your question, Kavita, about how do you ethically build AI is I also wonder how you can make AI that's responsible in the current day and age. There's a lot of AI risk out there. In our particular case, we think a lot about cultural bias and how we can mitigate that. AI is a giant autocomplete. And so if we are going to be working with AI, it's going to be making a lot of stereotypes in the way. And we have had to like structure, and this is part of like ethical piece of it, structure our use of AI in such a way that it's actually doing we have countermeasures and we have systems, and we've engineered it in a way where it's fighting that. I think that's also part of like responsibility that I've seen a lot of organizations take up charge in a really good way, which has been really inspiring.
Yeah, I want to actually add one thing. Sorry, but I think that really comes to mind for me is like, especially in early education, or like for the entire life of people, most people never learn social or emotional intelligence in a proper way, right? And if you think about like what is really important in life, that's actually number one. Like in anything, in like your job, in your life later on, like to understand how someone else feels, react to the feelings. And if the teacher can spend more of their time on teaching that and like managing conflict in the classroom and like really helping people to like get along with other humans, we would make a big step forward in my eyes. And if AI can help you to create the boring things out of the teacher's life, like creating the content, you have some class book, you want to create quiz cards, flashcards, those kind of things. All of those things are really easy for technology already now. And so that's why I'm so in love with this overall topic here, because we can make a big step towards like making people come along in a better way, because people have more time to teach about this social emotional intelligence.
I think it's really interesting to think about how AI, we used to see it as robot, right? The least human thing possible. But actually bringing it into the classroom can help us be more human than ever before. And I want to expand on that a little bit. I know the answers to all of those questions was spot on, right? We have to make sure that there's a responsibility on us to build the teacher into the tools that we're creating. But I think in the other side of that, there's also a responsibility to make sure that the tools are digestible and findable by teachers out there, right? We're talking about people who have less time than ever before. They're spread very thin. They don't have that much money to spend. So, what have you guys been thinking about with your teams on how do you get these tools to the people who need it most? How are you finding them? How are you teaching them how to do a lot of the things that they've done for 10, 20 years completely differently now? I'm going to present this one to Christian. I'm curious to hear. I know you're not even in the typical learning space the way that we would. So I'm curious on your thoughts of how do teachers use your tool to make their job better?
Yeah, so two parts to the questions. First of all, for me, I went through the German education system, so I'm very fortunate in that way that I went from kindergarten to or preschool to my bachelor. My wife went all the way to a PhD, and it was completely free education, right? Like it's what they do in Germany. they offer education for free, and that's how it should be, not like in the US here, unfortunately. And so this is kind of motivates us as well, that we bring education tools generally for free, and then of course, at a certain extent, we have to introduce some kind of paid tier, and there are other ways to monetize also companies down the line. And we raise venture capital to also make this product for free initially. But what we see and hear feedback on is that people, actually a school invested in us even. They use this when a teacher comes in the classroom and checks attendance, and it's like, hey, open your Learn XYZ app and just like learn about an animal of your choice or whatever it is, like something like bite-sized content, right? Like it's like casual bite-sized, like 5 minutes, and then you close the app again, and then you continue with the curriculum. Down the line, we will have abilities to also export your stuff, maybe create slides from it, or export it as an Instagram story because you're so excited about the content that you created with the power of AI that you want to share it. But it's really meant as a helping hand at this point.
I think I'd love to hear the others talk about how you reach the teachers, and especially as I hear you talk, all of you, one of the things that keeps teachers from being able to personalize and differentiate as much as they'd like to is time. They simply don't have the time to take one set of materials and then tweak it or change all the aspects of it for each person. And I think this is something that both Knowledge and Lit Lab do really well. So, Bodo, I want to start with you. Just tell us about how your personalization thesis really is about helping teachers get the materials they need to be able to differentiate. It saves them time. And then also, how do you get it in front of them? Because I know you have some great partnerships for that.
Yeah, so if we look at there's a huge market that generates educational content. However, 98% of that content is static and linear content, which is fine. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it, but it's really hard to personalize that. What is the solution? The solution is to generate interactive, dynamic content, but it takes such a lot of time and money to produce dynamic and interactive content. However, now with AI tools, this challenge is no longer acquiring us 40, 50 hours of time. It could be done in literally minutes. And that's what Knowledge AI does, is you provide Knowledge AI the static content you already use. This could be a textbook, it could be a video that you have, it could be a worksheet, or whatever the case may be. You provide that to Knowledge, and we will auto-generate for you a library of interactives that you can select from. Some students prefer to hear the audio, to watch a video. Some teachers like to provide flashcards. Some teachers like to provide X or Y or Z. We want to generate all of those choices for you, and you select ones you want. What isn't available as yet, but will be in the next few months, is you can upload a piece of material and then produce material for various different languages. Sorry, not languages, even though that's possible too, but for various different levels, which is critically important. You want to make sure that you can differentiate the material you provide for your students. And we do that all automatically without the teacher needing to learn any new tool too. Right? That is one of the core aspects that we recognize, is teachers don't have time to learn new tools. And so we make it really easy. Upload a document and go grab a cup of coffee, and a few minutes later you can use what's generated.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And as somebody who's used all three of these tools, they are, and Nectar as well, they really are worth getting your hands on, because it's one thing to talk about them, another to see it actually in action. You also focus a lot on saving teachers time. You're able to generate these whole libraries of texts that you teach different things. If you have a class learning the P phoneme, one student might have a Pretty Princesses book, and another has a Pet Ponies book, another has a Powerful Pumpkins book, or it can generate infinite numbers of different types of materials. Tell us about the time savings and how you get your tool into the hands of teachers. It really is a very important question.
Good question. And one thing I will point out is I'll mention what we do that's not new. One thing that teachers have always done is they've always thought about how to engage kids and how to make what they're teaching relevant to kids. When I taught math, I would ride my bike down the hallway to teach circumference. I wrote songs about tricky concepts like linear equations. And these are the type of things that teachers always do. They're always finding ways to engage and personalize what they're teaching for every single kid. But I think where it gets really exciting right now with AI is you can do that in a way that's scalable and relevant to every kid's individual interests as well. So that type of deep personalization has historically been really hard to accomplish, but now it's very reasonable to achieve. So if Christian really loves unicorns, and Boda likes space, and Kata likes ponies, and Alex, you like princesses, we can make content that is make individual decodable stories or practice the particular phoneme or grapheme you need practice with, but that also covers that skill. And that part's really exciting. And to your other question of how we reach teachers, one thing I'll say is that we try not to be prescriptive, we try to be suggestive. And what that means is that we don't tell a teacher you have to, this is the type of content you have to use. Instead, we suggest to the teacher a few ways that they can bring LitLab to their students. Some of our teachers never put a lab in front of their students. They download a decodable story, and then they work with their students on there. Some use it in a whole class setting. Some use it in small groups. Some use it in individual reading time. And all of that is okay. Part of why we built LitLab in the way that we did is we wanted it to be accessible to every teacher for their particular context. And that's a big reason why we're able to reach the teachers that we do.
So I'm actually going to steal a question from the chat, but it was something that I saw and I realized I can totally understand why people who are a little bit outside of that product building engineering space would love to know about how the tools are actually created. I think we've heard a lot in the news about AI hallucinating, right? Not always giving the right answers, not always pulling from the data set in the way it's supposed to. Without getting a little too technical, can we speak to how we're mitigating issues like hallucination or misinformation or bias within our tools?
Yeah, I think I just answered that in the chat too.
Oh, perfect.
The way we address it is we require the educator to provide us at least some source material. We use that so that source material becomes our ground truth. And we can't, from that moment onwards, the workflow of the AI pipeline cannot produce anything that's contrary to that ground truth. This is the way that we ensure that the teacher is in full control. They can upload the ground truth. This is what I believe. This is what I want my teachers to learn, my students to learn. And that's how we overcome the hallucinative aspects of generative AI.
Yeah, I want to add a few things there. So if you think about what you read in the news, oftentimes people just refer to what, type in ChatGPT, and, a general language model like needs to kind of solve it all, right? Like it needs to analyze data, it needs to answer any question, it needs to it has so many capabilities. But when it comes to actual learning and creating like these bite-sized contents or even flashcards or something, you always have a very specific topic. And two ways to do this in my eyes, or we do this at least. So like, of course, you can just ask different language models and it gives you some response. And then the other one is what Bodo just talked about, and we do this too, where you have trusted sources of content, and then you ingest this content into your product. And when someone asks a question, you basically analyze, what is this question about? Do we have like trusted source? If yes, we use that content and almost only summarize it. And it basically creates these boundaries around it. And so you mitigate hallucinations that way. And there are other things that we can do. So we, for example, we also ask different language models to give us scoring on content that a different language model creates. So a piece of content is being created, we ask a different model, hey, how accurate is information in this thing? Give us a score from 1 to 10. If the score is below, we rerun it until it's good enough. And so there are like certain tricks that you can do. And then there's also a human in the loop, right? Like we do content reviews quite significantly, especially about like topics that might be a little bit like spicy, or anything that has some war history. Like whenever there's a course about Second World War, we definitely make sure that we read the entire thing, because we don't want that there are any jokes or any fun things about something that is not appropriate. And so there's this mixture. But I think and Sam Altman and these guys, they sometimes say on stage this one sentence, and I like to repeat this as well, which is like, we are not perfect, but neither are you. And if I remember back when I was in school, a lot of times that some teachers actually, in my Abitur, like the highest school thing and after high school, right? Like our math exam, there was a factual incorrect thing. So you couldn't actually solve the puzzle. And we had to repeat the math exam, which was like a crazy thing. It went to the news and everything, right? Like humans make mistakes too. But these language models, some of them are less than a year old. So this is just the beginning of it, right? So the people that always say, oh, everything is like lies and hallucination, it's a path, and we're getting better every single day.
I love that. I think that's a perfect answer here, is that we aren't perfect as humans. And so if we're building AI, we can't necessarily expect it to be perfect just yet either. On our side, on Nectar, very similar to what you guys are doing, both Bodo and Christian. On the content side, Bodo, you're right. It's letting the instructor have control over what sort of content is uploaded and having that set the parameters of, now that's what the AI is able to answer within. Right? Creating fences. And I think that's the most important part, is using these large language models, but then bringing it down to a size that allows us to train our own content on it and not have so much information, which then what leads it to hallucinate more. And then also within our tool, something that we do that we found instructors really love is every time Soma answers a question for students, she adds a source at the bottom. So you can always click and see, where did she pull that exact piece of information from? Was it the syllabus? Was it the lecture notes? And then it'll link them directly to that piece of information and the exact line where it was found. So I think those are some little things that we can do that are not AI. That's, the human engineering part of it, that helps us bridge this gap between where we were and then this huge speed up that we've had this year, getting everyone on board to AI. I think we're going to have those pieces that allow humans to trust the robots a little bit more.
Yeah. And several of the products on this stage also do visuals. We've been talking a lot about large language models for text, but obviously there are illustrations in these stories. Bodo is creating interactive textbooks that have visuals in them. And Christian, all of the curiosities have visuals attached to every text. So when we talk about hallucinations, we don't just mean text, but visuals as well. I think we're all continuing to evolve. I want to take a question from the audience, because there's a really interesting one. I'm going to start with this one, which is about personalized learning. How do we provide personalized learning without taking away from the communal and social aspects of learning? I think that's an incredibly important question. I'd love to hear panel talk about personal versus communal and how they might work together. We start with you, Varun, actually.
Yeah, that's a fun one. And I think when When done with the right ingenuity, you can accomplish both. You can personalize learning while creating shared learning experiences. I'll give you an example. When we first started out, the thing that we found that kids loved the most on our platform was reading each other's stories. Now, some of these stories were like too challenging, and some of these stories were too easy. But because there were stories that their peers had like developed with AI, they were very excited by it, and they were willing to challenge themselves a little bit extra. Like that, I think there are. I think the learners are social creatures. We're all social creatures. If you walk into a classroom, you'll see like a lot of noise, and bustling happening, and if there are ways in which like we as developers can invite more of those interactions to happen, whether it's through our platform or whether it's live like person, I think that's where the magic gets really, really interesting.
I'd like to add to that. So I was working in the slums of Vera, and imagine you're in this like there's 20 girls, and they all like different things. They're all interested in different things. And my thesis was, can we tap into the intrinsic motivation? So I was really looking at what is it that these girls want to learn, and can we help them learn those things? Well, it turns out that a lot of the people have very different opinions of what they want to learn. Like some girls like to learn sewing, some girls wanted to become bicycle mechanics, some girls wanted to do X or Y or Z. But the mechanism we put in place was you need to prove that you know what you're doing by teaching two of your friends. What this allowed us to do was, yeah, sure, you can choose what you want to learn, but this mechanism we put in place forced the kids to teach each other concepts that the others may not be all that interested in. And so it forced that communal aspect. It did something really amazing. One is it forced the person learning this thing that they are interested in to learn it far more deeper, because now they're not just passing a standardized test, they need to teach others. So that was one really positive benefit. But the next positive benefit was that it helped to broaden the horizons of all the girls there, and also propagate learning throughout the system without there necessarily being a centralized authority propagating that. It was all decentralized. So that was two really interesting aspects of that communal nature of education.
We have a question here in the chat, and it's the one that's been upvoted the most. So I want to get this out of the way because I know some people are going to have questions about this. But what do we see as the role of standards like Common Core and assessments in building learning paths? And I want to direct this one to Varun. I'm really curious to see, especially in early age learners, where does that Common Core assessment come into what you're building?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I think I want to separate the two out of standards and assessments. Often our assessments are geared towards our standards, and it's the dominant way in at least US K-12 how we operate. It's really interesting about the space that we're in of K-2 is we're working in an environment where science of reading is taught on. And in that world, the standards are less relevant. What's more relevant is the progression of skills at which a student is learning their specific like phonemes, themes, their ability to decode, vocabulary, background knowledge, comprehension, all of those pieces. The standards don't do that great of a job of capturing that, but the really high quality curriculum, and there's a few that are really high quality out there, do a great job of that. I think what the best thing that we have found for our particular use case is when we sit on top of a high quality curriculum. We're not attempting to like every single standard, but we know where we specialize in coding, vocabulary building, background knowledge. What's really interesting, I think, in this particular moment, is you can build AI that is custom for anything, including for particular high quality curriculum, and that's part of what made us easy to adopt. Is we fit really nicely with high quality curriculum that's already out there.
Very quickly on standards, I think standards are critically important, but it's also important to notice that standards are in a flat two-dimensional taxonomy structure, which can't and does not represent the way that we learn and the way that information should be structured. And so we shouldn't think that we can use taxonomies and these standards to build courses from. That's a fundamentally flawed way of thinking of how education is structured. As long as we understand that, yes, standards are great because it allows us to judge apples to apples. It's fundamentally not. It should not be used to build courses from and learning experiences from.
I wanted to say one more thing here because I find it interesting what you just said about like these standards and like is even a standard, right? Like everyone learns also in a different way. I got this actually as criticism from so-called learning experts. They were like, "Oh, you're not like following this path, and then you have to do the structure the quiz this way." And we're like, "No, this is like almost a game." And some people learn in a gamified way, and other people like read New York Times articles all the way to the last word. Not everyone can focus, and we heard about this here, right? Like not everyone can focus for like our reading material. And so by exploring these new ideas, we can almost also create new standards in some form, right? Like in the end, it comes down to, can you learn something, or can you repeat this in some form, or like you feel good about the time that you spend, and then afterwards you can tell your friends about it, and it closes this loop again about like social feedback, and then you can learn together with others and you can share it. And so that's why I always have to smile a little bit when I hear these questions about like nerds and does it fit into this box that has been defined 30 years ago. No, it doesn't, but that's the beauty of it.
This sort of concept of top-down standards for, by a district or a country, and sort of bottoms-up standards, like how do you put all the pieces together, this sort of, we don't have to even call them standards, but bottoms-up learning graph, or a GPS for education, as you say, Bodo, like how do we put all the pieces together in a way that is actually connects to how people learn rather than top down, because people learn in different ways. We have one more really interesting question from the audience, and then I think we're going to wrap to the lounge. Question is, how can AI make all types of content, and I know you all think about different types of content, personalized and therefore more accessible to all students? So I think that wrapped into this question is personalization and accessibility, which is a core piece, especially of formal education. Let me throw that one to Bodo first, because you do all sorts of formats.
The way we're thinking of this is we're not going to get it right from get-go, right? But we're going to try our best to get at least a few components right. And the way we think of it is, you upload a piece of material. We would analyze that and create ingredients from this. For example, what are the key concepts that are being taught? What are the definitions of those concepts? What are the key questions that are being discussed? Think of these as like ingredients. And now that we have these ingredients, what can we make with these ingredients? So at the moment, Knowledge AI can make 15 different things, so 15 different cakes or cupcakes. I don't know how you, I'm trying to use the cooking metaphor, but you can use these ingredients for multiple different things. And so as we progress, we can use these ingredients to build something that is more accessible for population X or more accessible for population Y. We can continually improve on this. So we're not going to get everything right now. Our intention is we think of the analysis that the AI produces as analysis of ingredients, and then we generate different activities from that as we go. It's a really good question.
Yeah, Kavita, I know you think about this for Nectar as well. How do you think about accessibility and personalization?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I look at this a lot from, like I said, the perspective of when I was a student. And especially when you're looking at students with learning disabilities, there are just some forms of content that are easier for us to digest than others, right? Sometimes a video is too loud or too expressive, or maybe a text is too long and it's not chunked up correctly, so it's really hard to read. So, what we wanted to do when we were building Soma was give both faculty and students the ability to upload any type of content, video, a lecture transcript, a PowerPoint slide, whatever you want, to Soma. And then she's trained on that set of data. And now any student can go ask a question in any language or in any way that they choose to frame that question. And Soma's smart enough to figure it out and parse that from whatever piece of content and then feed it back to the student in a digestible way. And that's really how I see accessibility, is how can we take all of these different forms of content and make them accessible to every type of learner wherever they are right now. And especially when you're looking at adult and contemporary learners, I think that is a piece of accessibility that we often forget about, right? It's not just the kids, it's especially those learners where they have kids at home or they're working 2 jobs and they're going to school at night. Accessibility goes far past, I have a good reason for why I need this and it's because I'm autistic. It's not just that. It's, I just need this in the way that is delivered best to me and my brain right now in this moment. And that might change day to day. And so I think where AI can really come in and help us is being able to adapt to wherever the student is in that moment, in that day, and give them that content where they need it most, when they need it most.
Phenomenal. And Varun, do you want to wrap us out and talk about accessibility and personalization in a K2 classroom where you have non-readers and all sorts of things going on?
Yeah, I just want to underscore what Kavita said about like accessibility for learning differences is part of is not the margin that we should occasionally address. It's part of what we need to design for in the first place, and this is especially true for K2, with the population of kids that predominantly does not know how to read yet, and so if we were to give instructions on our app, kids would not know how to read it or understand it. We encountered this early on when we first started putting our illustrated stories out into the classrooms. We realized that like for many of these kids, having some sort of like audio capability is essential to them. We continue to invest in that over time, making the audio more natural sounding, making everything audio accessible, from like buttons that you click on to like titles here to specific words that you want phonetically sounded out. And that's not like features; that's how kids can actually access the content. That the cool part, there's some cool AI technologies that have come out on the audio piece of it as well, which I really like. Obviously, if you were to ask a browser to play a sentence, it would come out with this robotic voice. Now you can have voice models that actually sound like human speech, and that makes a big difference for kids. So, anyways, I love the point of accessibility. I just want to underscore that.
Yeah, this personalization of different media and different form factors is going to be huge for accessibility. It's already been huge in terms of voice and closed captioning and just being able to do things in all different ways. This has been an amazing panel. I'm going to close it out there. Join us in the lounge. One just quick announcement, an exciting bonus for today. You will actually be able to earn a credential if you'd like for attending the AI and EDU conference. You'll need to do is for each session you're attending, just think about something that stood out to you. We're going to send an email afterwards that you'll basically fill out a little tiny thing about what you found most interesting in each panel, and that will lead to a certificate and of course give us feedback about everything we're doing, and we'd love to be able to continue to do this. Thank you so much to our panel today, Christian, Bodo, Varun, and Kavita, as doing dual roles as a panelist and co-host. We'll see you all in the lounge, and please connect with these folks and check out their sites and their products. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.